Hello everyone, I'm Mr. Miller. Today we are here to talk about that arthropod group of insects a little bit more. Today we are going to be looking at the lifestyle of insects. Many insects are what we would consider to be solitary. In other words, the mother lays the eggs and then never sees those babies again. But there are other types of insects that we consider to be social insects. Social insects would include things like wasps, bees, ants, termites, and a few others. Social insects often have what we call a caste system. So like some countries still actually do in the world. There's a queen, which is the reproductive female. The reproductive males, which are sometimes called drones, like in bees. And then there's the workers or soldiers that are typically females that do not have the ability to reproduce. Today we're going to start by looking at honeybees, actually. So honeybees are social insects. They really can't live by themselves, so they live in a hive that's usually made up of three classes: the queen bee, the worker bees, and the drones or the males. You can see here that they come in a variety of different sizes. Now the queen bee here, you can see she has a red dot here, a pink dot, and here's a little greenish dot. Those are actually put there by beekeepers, okay, just so that when they open up the hive, they can easily identify them. If you had a beehive that was just in nature and not kept on a farm, then you would not find those dots on there. So the queen honeybee, she's the largest of the bees in the colony. She mates only once in her lifetime. Now, what happens is when their hive needs to produce a new queen, they will start feeding them a substance called royal jelly. Now, all of the bees that are forming are fed royal jelly for the first couple of days, but a lot of these will then be fed bee bread after the first 3 days, and those will turn into what we call worker bees. However, if they continue to be fed royal jelly for their whole developmental time, then they will form into a queen bee. And a queen bee will take off on a maiden flight, and then she'll be followed by the males, which are called the drones, and they will chase after her and they will mate with her. Now, she'll mate with as many as she can over the next day or two, and then she will go back and she will take over the hive. To take over the hive, what she often does is she will go and she will kill the other queens that are forming, because they don't just try to form one, they try to form maybe 10 or 12 at a time, and whichever one's the most viable is the one that will become queen. So they will fight to the death, and then she'll also have to kill her own mother, the original queen bee, or perhaps she may just kick her out of the hive. But either way, when a new queen takes over, she'll start for the next 3 to 5 years. She'll be laying about 1,500 to 2,000 eggs a day, especially in the summertime. She has a much larger head, a thorax, and a very large abdomen. Now, she creates a substance called a queen pheromone, which is actually what keeps the beehive kind of in unison to make it calm. The worker bees, on the other hand, so if you have a beehive of 50,000 bees, about 99% of those bees are going to be worker bees. There will be one queen, and then maybe 1% of the bees will be what we call the drones. The worker bee has the toughest job. They have to guard the hive. They have to tend to the queen. They feed her. They clean her. They feed the larvae. They clean the cells. They build the wax comb. They ventilate the hive. They gather nectar and pollen. And of course, they only get to sting once, and then they die. They may lay a few drone eggs sometimes, because drone eggs don't need to be fertilized. So we'll talk about the stinger a little bit more in just a moment here. The drone bee are the males. They are stingless. They do not have a stinger at all. And the reason is because actually for the females, the stinger is actually something called an ovipositor, which is where they mate at. And this is the female mating organ, is the ovipositor. So of course the males don't have that. The only job for the drone bee is to mate with the new queen. And then after they mate with the queen, what do they get? They die. Now, in the wintertime, when the food sources are getting a little bit less, the drones are often kicked out of the hive and left out to freeze to death. So if you take a look here at this, this is some larvae forming in different stages. Here we take a look at the stinger. You'll notice how it's a barbed stinger. And when that stinger goes inside of a person or something else, when the bee pulls away, it can't pull the barbs back out with it, so it leaves the stinger behind, and then the worker bee would actually die probably 10 to 15 minutes later, unless of course you're stepping on it and going into your foot, at which time the bee probably dies right then. Now, the queen bee, her stinger is actually very smooth, so she can sting multiple times, but then again, she's rarely out of the hive. As Mr. Hines talked to you yesterday about metamorphosis, bees are another type of insect that go through metamorphosis. This is the process of changing from a larvae to a winged insect. A queen bee develops from an egg in about 15 days because they're fed just that royal jelly, which is a high protein food. The worker takes a little longer, about 21 days. And the drone, which is that unfertilized egg, actually takes about 24 days for it to go through complete metamorphosis. Beehives usually have about 50,000 bees, especially the ones that you would find on the farm like this one here. The ones that you find in nature may have quite a few less, maybe 20,000 to 30,000 bees. In her lifetime, notice I said her lifetime because a worker bee is always a she. In her lifetime, she will produce about 1 teaspoonful of honey. So on that typical jar of honey you buy, you may have the honey made from 60 or 70 different bees in there. The bee dance, the bee waggle, informs other bees of distance to food source and the direction compared to that of the sun. Let's take a quick look here at this video.
Bee workers are able to send complex messages to one another. In the wild, they sometimes nest out in the open, but mankind has persuaded them to live and store their honey in hives. The colony's hut is its queen. She is just a little bigger than her subjects and mother of them all. In spring, when food stocks are low, the workers get busy collecting nectar. They have a remarkable method of telling one another where to find the most productive flowers. It's called the waggle dance. This returning bee has just found a new source of nectar and is going to tell others in the hive about it. First, she gathers an audience. To do that, she climbs on her sisters' backs and vibrates her abdomen. Now that she's got their attention, she begins her dance, using a code of movements that tell her fellow workers where her discovery lies. The duration of her waggle indicates the distance to the nectar source. The longer the waggle, the further the flower. And the angle at which she dances across the cone tells them the direction to the flower in relation to the sun. Her instructions are remarkably accurate and can pinpoint the location of a nectar source over 6 kilometers away. Some of her fellow workers set off immediately to find it. In one short season, the colony's workers will visit up to 500 million flowers and will make around 90 kilograms of honey. That is sufficient to sustain the whole colony through the coming winter when there is no nectar to be had.
So that is quite the dance there that they can communicate with each other. And then, of course, we do have some crazy people who like to do some crazy things with honeybees. And I am sure hoping that this guy does have some undies on under here. Once again, thank you for listening. It is time now to work on your Google form to answer questions about this. You may review this video as much as you like to as you're answering those questions. Thank you.